Well, hey everyone. Today I'm going to be interacting with a video from a podcast where the subject of abortion comes up and there's sort of a unique take on it. So we'll engage and see what we can learn.
We're not going to change America by making a stand on abortion. Adopt, help out single moms, do whatever you can to help women choose life. That's how you change the world.
Absolutely.
That's how you change the world, you know? And so there's not one passage in the New Testament that speaks about abortion. But do you know that abortion was extraordinarily common in Rome? Especially if you were a little girl.
All right, so he's right that there's not a passage in the New Testament that speaks about abortion. For the Jews during that time, they were clear on opposition to abortion. The early Christians, and he'll talk a little bit about this, were unanimously clear on the evil of abortion. I think it's a little bit of a strange thing just to act like there is not a value on opposing the murder of unborn children. And while I agree with the idea, I agree with Christians adopting, I agree with Christians helping single moms, I think there is a little bit of a misnomer here, that there's an idea that hey, if Christians were just adopting, then abortions wouldn't be happening. That there's no evidence to suggest that that's the case. So I think there is sort of a false dichotomy here where it's like, hey, just stop focusing on this, focus on this, and it would fix it. It wouldn't fix it. It's a wonderful thing to do, but it wouldn't fix it. We have a soul problem with the fact that there's such a high demand for abortion. So yes to what he's saying, but yes also to the opposition to abortion and no to the false dichotomy.
So you have a little girl, right?
I do, yeah.
So if Tyler was a Roman, he probably would have had you take your daughter and set her at the steps of a local temple to die on the steps. And you know who scooped her up? Christians. And they didn't care what color she was. They didn't care what ethnicity she was. And then all of a sudden in 30 to 40 to 50 years, we have this church that's every tribe, every tongue, every nation. Because Christians didn't protest abortion, they scooped up unwanted babies. And they said, we'll raise them, we'll raise you. And that's how the church became so diverse.
Yeah, so the church did oppose abortion. He's not right on that. But there wasn't sort of the legal mechanisms or some of the recourse that we have today. The church absolutely did oppose abortion. I think part of the challenge with all of this is that I think he's acting like the parallel is 100% between the babies that were left on the steps and the babies that are aborted today. And that's obviously not the case because you can't go and get an aborted baby and say, now I'll raise this aborted baby. The baby is already dead. Whereas the baby left on the steps, you could go rescue that baby. And so that is one of the big differences here. If there was a way to do that, if there was a sense of like, all right, these women go in there and their babies are born and they're alive, but then they're just left there to die, then we could say, hey, as Christians, we're focusing our efforts on going in, getting those babies. But that's not what's happening. But he is right, absolutely, about the idea that this is, and there are still places where this is the case, but this was part of the witness of the early church that they would do this. And there's non-Christian historians that cite the fact that they would do this. And it led to the ethnic diversity, partly. I mean, that's part of the beauty of this. There was some ethnic diversity that it was led to. It's also one where you can imagine like, there were a lot more women in the church than men because sadly it was a lot of the little girls who were left to die instead of little boys. That's also a great way to get boys interested in church where it's like, well, there's a whole bunch of girls there. This is something where I think when we think about the issue of abortion, part of the reason why, even though I like a lot of what he said, I grate against it a little bit, is because I think that we can try to find a way to be pro-life that is above criticism. And this is a way that sort of like there's going to be a lot more applauding from the world on what he said, where they're just going to be like, oh, good, like good. Yes, rescuing babies who are left on the steps, good. You know, we're all for that. Doing stuff for single moms, we're all for that. Adoption, we're all for that. Saying that abortion is wrong and evil and the killing of a child, we're against that. So I think that, first of all, for a lot of the moms that are considering abortion, they are presented with the options. At least, for example, if they go to a Sure Pregnancy Clinic or some pregnancy resource center, they're presented with the options. And it's like, all right, the options are just have your child and raise your child, get an abortion, or put your child up for adoption. And adoption is, for the women, almost universally, it is the least desirable option for them. Because from their perspective, they're saying, well, I'm still going to go through the process of having the child. I'm still going to go through all of the difficulty and inconveniences, and I'm also going to have the emotional bonding with the child, and then I'm going to give the child away. Emotionally, many of them feel like it would be easier to just abort the child, which is horrific, but it's just sort of the reality, where they're like, well, if I'm going to go through all the trouble of having a child, I want to be able to have that child. And if I'm not going to have that child, I would just rather abort the child now. I'm not saying it's clear thinking. I'm just saying it's reality. So the idea of like, hey, if there were just more Christians who are willing to adopt, this problem would go away. I wish that was true. That's just not true at all. We do need to do stuff for single moms. I think that we can do things to make abortion less appealing. But I believe at this point, this is a soul problem. We need to have national repentance. And so I think that we do need to have bold people who are calling this evil. It's like Walker Percy back when Roe v. Wade was, I think it was about the time it was getting codified. He said something to the effect of, it looks like all of you are going to get your wish and you're going to get what you want, but what you're not going to get is you're not going to get to do it without us telling you what you're doing. And that is part of the prophetic call of the church, to be able to say, we're not going to allow you to get away from the fact of what you're doing and the sole problem that the United States has because we do this. And we're not going to get away from the demand of that just by adopting children, even though pro-adoption, absolutely we should do that.